Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. And we have a lot to break down. You know, it was 1 year ago this weekend that we were talking about the extremely disappointing opening of Elemental. It came in second place behind The Flash, which was its own disappointing opening. And even though Elemental went on to leg out pretty impressively, it still wasn't a great sign for Pixar. And yet here we are 1 year later, and things are completely different because Inside Out 2 smashed through every expectation, even the highest expectations for its big opening this weekend. And we're going to break everything down in just a minute. Before we do, though, a quick reminder, this Friday night is the live event that I'm doing with my friend Christian Harloff in New York City. We're going to be live at a venue called the Green Room 42, and you can still get tickets if you look down in the description below. We would love to see you in person there in New York, but there is a live stream option. So if you can't make it to New York, but you still want to experience the event live, you'll be able to see it from home. You won't be able to ask questions like the folks there will be able to do, but you'll be part of the night. So be sure to check out that description. I would love to see you this Friday night in New York City. And I love New York. I can't wait to get back. I just love the city. So be sure to check that out. I would love to see you there. But let's turn now to the weekend box office. Last week, it was not all doom and gloom because Bad Boys Ride or Die had an impressive opening. This week, an even more impressive opening with Inside Out 2. It was the number one movie with $155 million. Keep in mind, the upper level of expectations, really, according to tracking, was around $90 million. So it just smashed through those expectations. We'll talk a little bit about why that might have been in just a couple of minutes. God, just $155 million. I've been talking a lot about the theatrical industry and the fact that it's been in trouble. I did a whole video about it a few weeks ago, and I don't think that this single movie changes what's going on with the theatrical exhibition industry, but I do think that it's certainly a great thing that there are a bunch of people out there seeing Inside Out 2. A bunch of people went to see Bad Boys last weekend. When I tried to get tickets for a different movie online this past weekend, the Cinemark website was set up for an auto queue because I guess there was so much demand for tickets that they couldn't take all the traffic at once. I mean, that is a problem, but it's not a bad problem to have. A lot of people are saying like, well, where are all the people saying that the theaters were in trouble a couple of weeks ago? They are still, but the thing that you want, if you want to talk about recovery, is a movie like Inside Out 2 that doesn't just meet expectations, but shows that the audience is still passionate enough to go to the theaters to see the right movie. For theaters to try to recover or to try to find out at least what the future of their industry is going to be, you have to prove that people will at least show up to see the movies they're excited about. There were a lot of people that were obviously excited about Inside Out 2, and we're going to talk a lot more about this opening, but let's go through the rest of the top five quickly. Bad Boys Ride or Die is in second place, but a 41.6% drop for an R-rated action film in the summer against a big movie like Inside Out 2 is a really good hold. $33 million. Its total is now at $112.2 million domestically. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was number 5 last week. It bounces back up to number 3 with a 4% drop-off. That is not a typo. It dropped less than 10% in its 6th week. It's not a huge total, but it does show that there is still demand from the audience to see this movie. $5.2 million for the weekend. Its domestic total is now at about $157.8 million. The Garfield movie comes in 4th place. It dropped 50% in weekend number 4, bringing in another $5 million, $78.5 million total domestically for that movie. And then The Watchers is in 5th place. It drops 47.7%. Not bad considering that the reviews and the audience response wasn't great. $3.6 million and a $13.6 million domestic total. All right, so let's talk about Inside Out 2, which did have an estimated opening weekend of $155 million. If it does what it's been doing all weekend, those final numbers could come in a little bit higher because every time there was an estimate for how it was going to do this weekend on Friday night, on Saturday morning, on Saturday night, it just exceeded it. So we could see it get between 155 to 160. If it really overperforms, it could get over 160 million. We'll just see what those final numbers are when they come in later today. But let's look first first at where it falls as far as 2024 openers, it is, of course, the highest animated opening movie of the year at $155 million. It only beat Kung Fu Panda 4 by about $100 million. Kung Fu Panda 4 drops down to second place at $57.9 million. The Garfield movie is in third at $24 million. Demon Slayer to the Hashira Training comes in fourth at $11.5 million. And then Spy Family Code White is bumped down to fifth at $4.8 million. Inside Out was also the highest opening domestic movie of the year so far, nearly doubling what Dune Part 2 put up back in March. So $155 million is number one. That bumps the opening of Dune Part 2 at $82.5 million down to number two. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is in third at $80 million, followed by Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes in fourth place at $58.4 million, and Kung Fu Panda 4 at $57.9 million. Bad Boys Ride or Die only lasted 1 week on this chart before it got bumped out by Inside Out 2. When we look at opening weekends this decade, these are the top opening weekends of the 2020s. Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously number one at $260.1 million back in December 2021. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness at $187.4 million in May of 2022. Then Black Panther Wakanda Forever in November 2022 at $181.3 million. Last year's Barbie at $162 million back in July. And then Inside Out 2 currently at $155 million. If it drastically overperforms what the estimates are, and anything over $5 million is a pretty drastic change from the estimated numbers, it could eclipse Barbie, but it would have had to have had a real surge on Sunday. That has been the pattern that we've been seeing. As far as animated opening weekends all time, Incredibles 2 is at number one at $182.6 million. Then Inside Out 2 with the second best opening ever for an animated film at $155 million. The Super Mario Brothers movie's in third at $146.3 million, followed by Finding Dory at $135 million, and Frozen 2 at $130.2 million. Now, I'm going to head off the question right now because I have fought this battle in many videos before about why 2019's The Lion King isn't number one on this list. I understand that it was made using computer animation, but it is sort of this weird hybrid thing. Favreau and Disney both say that it's either completely not an animated film or it's not entirely an animated film. When I did my breakdown of the live-action Disney remakes, I included 2019's The Lion King because it is meant to mimic live action. So I understand that the movie is computer animated, but I'm also kind of going with Disney's categorization here. It's in this weird in-between area. I understand people that want to put it on the animated list. I am choosing not to put it on the animated list, but I didn't forget about it. I actually went back. There's been 3 or 4 different videos where we've had this discussion already. I get it. This is the judgment call I'm making. Other people may make a different one. Now, there's a long history of animated films being released, and we don't have box office data going all the way back to the 1930s, at least not for animated opening weekends. But for the data that we do have, I wanted to look at the top 10 animated openings of all time, adjusted for inflation. So we're going to go beyond the top 5 to the top 10 to see where Inside Out 2 falls. So when we look at it adjusted for inflation, Incredibles 2 still has the highest opening weekend all time for an animated film at $228.4 million adjusted, followed by Shrek the Third at $184.2 million and Shrek 2 at $179.6 million, keeping in mind that Shrek 2 also opened on a Wednesday, so that number would be even higher if it had opened on Friday. Finding Dory adjusts up to number 4 at $176.7, followed by Frozen 2 at $160 million and Toy Story 3 at $158.8 million. Right now, Inside Out 2 is at number 7 at $155 million. I think it is more likely, perhaps, that it could eclipse Toy Story 3 when the final numbers come in. And again, if that does happen, we'll talk about it next week. Minions comes in 8th place at $153.3 million adjusted, followed by last year's The Super Mario Brothers movie, again with the caveat that it opened on a Wednesday, and then Toy Story 4 at $148.5 million. 5 years ago, hard to believe, but it was 5 years ago that Toy Story 4 opened. So how did Inside Out 2 do what it did this weekend? Well, to answer that question, I think it's always important to look at who showed up to see the movie. And when I break down demographic stuff like this, which has been reported in the media and which is gathered by people who go out and take all this information, a lot of people say, well, nobody asked me. Yes, because they don't take demographic info from every single theater. As with all things like this, there are sample markets where they look at ticket sales, they get data from different sources, and then they report it. So this is not comprehensive information that's taken from every moviegoer in every market. It's just from different sample markets that are supposed to be representative of the whole. So according to the demographic information that we have, Inside Out 2 skewed heavily female at 63% versus 37% male. 53% of the audience reportedly was 17 and under. So this was a younger skewing movie, not entirely shocking. As far as ethnicity, 31% of the audience was white, 40% of the audience was Hispanic and Latino. So Pixar really did a great job at appealing to that specific demographic. They were the biggest demographic of everybody who showed up to see the movie. 13% of the audience was Black and 16% were Asian and other ethnicities. And this is a big one. Same-day ticket buyers reportedly made up 62% of all purchases, and that is a big reason why I think the movie exceeded the tracking numbers, because when they do tracking, which is essentially when different firms look at how much they think a movie is going to open to, one of the things that they consider is pre-sales. And pre-sales on Inside Out 2 were obviously strong. Almost 40% of moviegoers bought their tickets ahead of time, but 62% were what they call walk-ups. And you can't track walk-ups. You can track audiences saying that they want to see a movie, but you can never actually tell how many people are going to show up on the day and see the movie. So this is a movie that skewed young. It skewed to families, and the audience was less likely to buy tickets ahead of time, which makes it a lot different than, say, your MCU audience, perhaps, the ones that are going to get their tickets right away for opening day. Inside Out 2 really drove so much walk-up business this weekend that it was, in a way, untrackable. Nobody really had any idea of how it was going to do, and I think that's a big reason why this took so many people by surprise, because there were so many people that nobody knew was going to show up until this opening weekend. All right, let's look at Inside Out 2 as far as openings overall. These are the wide opening weekends, and I say wide opening weekends because a couple of the movies opened in limited release. And you'll also see that Soul, Luca, and Turning Red are not on this list because they did not receive theatrical releases at the time they were released. They have received later re-releases in theaters, but I'm not listing them here. As we mentioned earlier, Inside Out 2 is the second biggest animated opening of all time, which also makes it the second biggest Pixar opening of all time because Incredibles 2 is at number 1. Finding Dory's in third, Toy Story 4 is in fourth, and Toy Story 3 is in fifth place. And if you look to where we were last year, all the way down there at number 24 was Elemental at $29.6 million. So Inside Out 2 opened about $125 million higher than the last Pixar film. And one thing this tells me is that the idea of brand loyalty to Pixar is not necessarily something that we see or honestly have seen in a lot of cases. While people might be interested in a movie because it was made by Pixar, they're not necessarily going to show up just because it was made by Pixar. And I know a lot of people are already saying, well, this is good news for Elio, which is the next Pixar film. It comes out next summer. And I think that it's a little too early to say that this is going to have a big impact on Elio, because this could be a repeat of what we saw back in 2015. Inside Out came out in the summer. It was one of Pixar's biggest hits, but that fall, The Good Dinosaur came out, and it was one of Pixar's lowest grossing films. So I wouldn't say right now that this is necessarily a great sign for Elio, because number one, it's an original movie, and number two, we don't necessarily know the audience is going to show up because it's a Pixar film. However, there have been a lot of original Pixar films that have done well. This one's going to be very much a wait and see what the marketing is, see what the buzz is, but the Pixar brand name itself isn't exactly going to boost its chances at the box office. When we look at Pixar opening weekends all time adjusted for inflation, it's number 4 behind Incredibles 2, Finding Dory, and Toy Story 3. Toy Story 4 rounds out the top 5, and then the rest of that top 10 is Finding Nemo, Inside Out, the first movie, The Incredibles, Monsters University, and Monsters, Inc. And I think that's something to note as well. Inside Out 2, once you adjust for inflation, still drew about $35 million more business than the first Inside Out, which I think is an indication that people liked that movie, which we already knew, but also that they still carried that like and that love 9 years later to deliver the sequel, an even bigger opening. When we look at overall domestic gross, Inside Out 2, after just 3 days, has outgrossed 5 other Pixar movies. We have last summer's Elemental, Cars 3, The Good Dinosaur, Lightyear, and Onward, which it should be noted had a shortened theatrical run due to the theater closures because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And when we look at it adjusted for inflation, Inside Out 2 has, of course, also beaten Onward, but has handily beaten the complete domestic run of Lightyear back in 2022. And that was kind of a franchise movie. And I think really that just underscores the massive disappointment that Lightyear was, because even tangentially related to the Toy Story franchise, you would have expected it to do a lot better. And yet here it is 2 years later, having been beaten by the opening weekend of another Pixar film. Finally, when we look at worldwide gross, and Soul, Luca, and Turning Red are on this list because they were released in some theaters around the world, it has beaten those 3 movies as well as the lifetime worldwide gross of Onward and Lightyear, and it'll be moving up this list pretty quickly. And when we talk about where this movie could go from here, it's worth noting that the other 5 films that it's in company with, as far as the 5 top Pixar openings, Toy Story 3, Toy Story 4, Finding Dory, and Incredibles 2, all 4 of those other movies have made at least $400 million domestically, and all 4 of those other films broke the $1 billion mark worldwide. So if Inside Out 2 doesn't make it to $1 billion, it would be breaking the trend. And for a lot of people who said that Deadpool and Wolverine would be the first $1 billion grossing movie of the summer, it looks like Inside Out 2 has a real good shot at setting that mark first. Inside Out 2 also broke a couple of streaks that we've been talking about for a while here on the show. First of all, the days in the year until the first $100 million opener, that freezes 2024's number at 165. So since 2010, only 2021 with Spider-Man No Way Home, 2011 with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and 2014 with Transformers Age of Extinction have gotten further into the year without a $100 million opening film. And when we look at that number adjusted for inflation, we already knew that it was the second longest streak. So we freeze that number at 165, a little more than 50 days longer than 2011. When you adjust for inflation, 2011's first $100 million opener was Fast 5, 118 days into the year. Nothing's really ever going to beat those 2021 numbers just because the pandemic and everything that was going on with theaters reopening. Still, though, it's nice to freeze those numbers and not keep racking up those days. This also freezes the gaps between $100 million openings. So we are frozen there at 329 days. We almost made it 1 full year without a movie opening to $100 million. So it goes from Barbie to Inside Out 2. The longest gap, of course, is 727 days between The Rise of Skywalker and Spider-Man No Way Home. And if you discount the pandemic, this was 70 days longer than the next longest gap, which was from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom in 2018 to Captain Marvel in 2019. When you adjust those numbers for inflation, we freeze at 329 days, which is a little over twice as long as the next non-pandemic related gap between $100 million openings, between Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Fast 5 between 2010 and 2011. That was 162 days. So we knew we were never going to catch up to those long pandemic stretches. The goal here, though, hopefully, is to also not catch up to one of these stretches again, to not go nearly 1 calendar year between $100 million opening movies. If 2025 is as stacked as we think it's going to be, and the movies perform like they should, then we shouldn't see another gap this big again. But it's a very volatile industry right now, and nobody can really tell the future. All right, so a lot of those are numbers that we're going to keep tabs on. Let's look at the rest of the top 10 for this weekend. At number 6 is If, which finally took a somewhat big tumble. No surprise, because it had direct competition from Inside Out 2. It dropped 56% in its 5th weekend for a $3.4 million total, but it did bypass the $100 million mark domestically. It has held around impressively since its so-so opening. Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga is not in that boat. It dropped 42.4% in its 4th weekend for a $2.4 million total. Its domestic total now is just $63.1 million. We broke down a couple weeks ago that it is going to be a big money loser. The Fall Guy in its 7th week dropped 42.1% for a $1.5 million total and $87.9 million total domestically. The Strangers Chapter 1 in its 5th week dropped 57.7% for a total total under $1 million, $760,000, and a $33.8 million domestic total. And then for a second weekend, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring Extended, it dropped 74.2% from last weekend, but because it's a pretty shallow box office pool right now, it's able to make that number 10 spot at $632,000. The re-release has totaled up about $3 million total domestically over 2 weeks. Dropping out of the top 10 this past weekend was just one movie, which was the extended version of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. It was in the top 10 last weekend, but did not make it this weekend due to Inside Out 2 hitting the marketplace. When we look at the biggest theater count changes for this past weekend, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, was a big loser. It lost 1,110 theaters. It's now in under 2,000 theaters. In a Violent Nature also lost over 1,000 theaters. It remains in only 203, although strangely, one of them was in my local market, and I did check it out this past weekend. It's an interesting movie. I think I liked the idea of it better than the total execution of it. The Strangers Chapter 1 dropped 989 theaters. It's now barely in wide release in 1,027 theaters. Ezra lost the vast majority of its theaters. It lost 983. It's now only in 162. And then The Fall Guy lost 747 theaters. It's now in 1,663. Looking at what I call the road to recovery, which has been a very depressing chart, what a difference a couple of hits make, because not only did we skyrocket from far below where we've been since theaters reopened, we jumped up not only above that number, but slightly above the weekend average from pre-pandemic times, 2015 through 2019. And keep in mind, this wasn't just Inside Out 2 having a big opening. That obviously had a lot to do with it. It was also the holding strength of Bad Boys Ride or Die that got us this high on this chart. So the goal here is to keep it up. I think we're going to see a bit of a slump this upcoming weekend, but we've got some heavy hitters coming up, including Despicable Me 4 and Deadpool and Wolverine. The highest performing film between 2021 and 2023 for this weekend was the continued run of Jurassic World Dominion. The highest performing film for the 2015 to 2019 window was the debut of Jurassic World, which actually opened number 1. The original Inside Out did very well, but opened number 2 that same weekend. We've got a lot more to break down with the box office numbers, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsors for this week's show. This episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon. I am a cereal addict, no joke. I eat cereal for one meal almost every day of the week, but as you get older, it's important to watch out for stuff like sugar and empty carbs when you eat. That's why I'm glad I have Magic Spoon stocked in my pantry. I have the Magic Spoon variety pack that contains 4 flavors: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs with only 140 calories per serving. It's also high protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. It's hard to choose, but my go-to is the fruity flavor. It has that great taste I remember from when I was a kid, but with more protein and less sugar. And it stays crunchy in milk for as long as I'm eating it, which is always a bonus for any cereal aficionado. It's great to know that I can have my cereal, eat it too, and stay conscious of my carb and sugar intake. Go to magicspoon.com/movies to grab a variety pack and try it today, and be sure to use our promo code MOVIES at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/movies and use the code MOVIES to save $5 off. Thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode. This episode is sponsored by Mando. It's mid-June here in Arkansas, which means it's not just hot, it's unbelievably humid. Just walking from the store to my car means I'm already starting to sweat, and more than a few minutes outside, forget about it. Luckily, the one thing I and you don't have to worry about is adding BO to the summer forecast with Mando. Mando whole body deodorant is made with mandelic acid, which blocks the sweat-eating bacteria on your skin from causing odor. Mando solid stick deodorant has been proven to control odor for 72 hours, and their body wash alone has been shown to control odor for 24 hours. I use the body wash in the shower, to get a nice base level, then apply the solid deodorant so I know whether my day involves mowing the yard or just walking around the block, I don't have to worry about smelling bad. Plus, I always have a pack of deodorant wipes handy just in case. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code DAN at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. So with all these new summer movies hitting theaters, there are a couple that have ended their domestic theatrical runs, and I wanted to take you through a bit of the profit loss and see how they did in the theatrical window. One of them is Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, which is now done domestically and still putting up a little bit of money worldwide. Last week I reported that it had beaten Kong Skull Island to be the highest grossing worldwide film in the legendary MonsterVerse. According to the official reported numbers, it's still just shy of that, although again, I'm sure some of that money is going to come trickling in. But the numbers you're going to see here are going to be below the $568 million it would need to beat Kong Skull Island. That's because I want the math to math here. So how did Godzilla Kong do in theaters? Well, when you look at its overall numbers, it had a budget of $135 million, very responsible for a film its size. I'm going to give it a $100 million marketing budget, which brings its total estimated cost to $235 million. It did very well in China, made $132.2 million. I estimate $29.7 million of that coming back to the investors, $239.1 million from other international markets, so I estimate $95.6 million of that coming back to investors. Then $62 million coming back from the movie's first week in domestic release, $21.5 million net coming back from week 2, and then $26.9 million coming back from the release in weeks 3 and onward. So we have a gross of $567.6 million. I estimate a net gross coming back to the studio and investors of $235,850,995, which when you subtract the costs estimated at $235 million, folks, if this was The Price is Right, then Godzilla Kong would have won both showcases because that puts it less than $1 million into theatrical profit. The estimated theatrical profit there is $850,995. But as we talk about here on the show all the time, the goal really for a lot of studios is to get a movie to theatrical profitability in the theatrical window, because that means that you have paid for all of the marketing costs and you've paid for the production costs just with ticket sales, and all the other stuff is pure profit. So this may look like Godzilla Kong isn't going to make much money, but it actually means it's going to be a pretty healthy moneymaker, and the studio was able to achieve their basic objective of getting it profitable. Now, of course, you'd love for it to be one of these movies that makes a lot of money in the theatrical window, but not every movie is going to do that. This was a good result. It wasn't a fantastic, mind-blowing result, but this is a good result for Godzilla Kong, and the key here was the budget. $135 million for a movie that size. A lot of other studios would have made that movie for $200 million, and we'd be looking at a much different profit breakdown. But smart budgeting is what won the day here. And it's a similar thing to the next movie that we're talking about, which is Kung Fu Panda 4, which has also ended its domestic run. It had a budget of $85 million reportedly, which is substantially lower than the previous films in the franchise. I'm going to give it an estimated marketing budget matching its production budget at another $85 million. So that puts its costs at $170 million. And when you look at the money coming back, $11.5 million from China, $119.5 million from other countries internationally, $46.6 million from its first week domestically, $21.2 million from its second week, and then $38.5 million from week 3 plus because it had good legs and stuck around for a while. That means we have a gross total of $543.8 million from the worldwide box office. I estimate a net of $237.5 million. When you subtract the estimated production costs of $170 million, that gets you to a theatrical profit of $67.5 million, which means that Kung Fu Panda 4 is going to be a substantial moneymaker for DreamWorks because it went well over what it needed to make theatrically to break even. And now all of the stuff as far as PVOD and digital sales and rentals, that all gets added to that, not to mention the merchandising, which isn't even really included here. It keeps the brand alive. You keep selling plushies and getting people to go to ride rides, etc. So this did what I think it was supposed to do. It kept the brand alive. It made money for the studio in the theatrical window, and it's going to make more money through the other revenue streams. All right, let's look now at the top 5 movies internationally this past weekend. So we're going to move past the domestic market to everything outside of the US and Canada. And Inside Out 2 was also massive worldwide, $140 million from international markets. And keep in mind, it did not open in several key markets, including France, Italy, Spain, China, and Brazil. It doesn't open in Japan until August. That was over $100 million of the movie's first worldwide gross. So it still has a lot of box office money yet to be mined. So $140 million for Inside Out 2, another $30.8 million for Bad Boys Ride or Die, $10.9 million for Haikyuu, The Dumpster Battle. That's because it opened in China this past weekend. The Garfield movie brings in $7.2 million, and Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, brings in $5.3 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top 5 movies worldwide, and Inside Out 2 opened to a massive $295 million. Once final numbers come in, that could be over $300 million. So it wasn't just big domestically. This was a massive worldwide opening. There were reportedly record crowds in Mexico and other countries, so it wasn't just the US that was crazy for this movie. Bad Boys Ride or Die held well worldwide. It drops 39%, but brings in another $63.8 million when you include all markets. The Garfield movie dropped 51.8% for a $12.2 million total. Then we have Haikyuu, which goes up to $11.1 million when you add in a few other markets, followed by Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which drops 30.1% from last weekend for an $8.6 million total. When we look at the biggest worldwide Hollywood debuts of the year, we see that Inside Out 2, by a margin of over $100 million, had the biggest debut for a Hollywood film in 2024 with $295 million. That bumps Godzilla Kong: The New Empire to second place at $194 million, Dune Part 2 to third at $182.5 million, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes to fourth at $130.9 million, and Bad Boys Ride or Die to fifth with $105 million. So great news for Inside Out 2 around the world. All right, before we look at a few more charts from this past weekend, I wanted to loop back to last week's show and note a couple of revisions and corrections from when final numbers came in for the weekend of June 7th through 9th, and they really are very minor corrections. First of all, when we look at the per theater averages, Bad Boys Ride or Die ended up with the highest per theater average for the weekend of June 7th through 9th, and that's because I Used to Be Funny was reported in a smaller number of theaters initially than it actually played in. So Bad Boys Ride or Die was the per theater winner for the 7th through the 9th, followed by Tuesday, Robot Dreams, I Used to Be Funny, and then a movie that hadn't reported when I did last week's show called Benel and Adama, which is a film from Senegal about a young couple whose love is challenged by their tribal obligations and drastic changes that are happening in their world. Also a note on the limited release film chart, the difference here being Escape from Germany, which was actually that number 5 film. It had not reported last week when I did the show, so it came in 5th place at $30,667. The remaining 4 films, I Saw the TV Glow, the 25th anniversary of Run Lola Run, Robot Dreams, and Evil Does Not Exist, remain where they were on the chart. And then the biggest theater count change chart from the weekend of June 7th. Late Night with the Devil actually added 519 theaters that weekend for one last push in theaters. I think it got the movie over $10 million domestically, but that put it as the 4th biggest theater count change for the past weekend. So Sight was still number 1, losing 1,400 theaters, followed by Furiosa, Babes. Then we have Late Night with the Devil adding theaters, and The Strangers Chapter 1 losing 511 theaters. Well, Inside Out 2 shook up the summer box office, and let's see where things fall right now. Per the reported grosses, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is still the number 1 movie of the summer. The final numbers may put Inside Out 2 at that number 1 spot outright. Regardless, it's going to pass Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes today with the Monday gross. So we have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes at number 1, Inside Out 2 at number 2. Bad Boys Ride or Die moves up 3 spots. It's now the 3rd highest grossing film of the summer at $112.2 million. If passes $100 million but drops 2 spots, The Fall Guy drops 2 spots, The Garfield movie drops 2 spots. Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga drops 2 spots, and it'll be out of the top 10 in a matter of weeks. The Strangers Chapter 1 drops 1 spot. Tarot drops 1 spot to number 9. And The Watcher stays at number 10. That's because it moved above Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which drops it out of the top 10 altogether and keeps The Watchers where it is. And when you look at my box office predictions for this summer, I had Inside Out 2 as the 3rd highest grossing movie of the year, and it really just depends on what Despicable Me 4 and Deadpool and Wolverine do. If Inside Out 2 really does kind of sate that audience hunger for a family movie, then we could see Despicable Me 4 maybe not performing to the heights that people thought that it would, or it could be really big and we see a tussle there for that top 3 spot. But this was one of my few so far, I think, somewhat accurate calls for the summer, putting Inside Out 2 as high as it is. The next movie that's on my prediction list is A Quiet Place Day 1, which I ranked number 7 for the summer and which opens in a couple of weeks. Obviously, Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga, a bad call there at number 6. I don't think it's going to be in the top 10 at all. I'd be shocked if it was. And I think that the Garfield movie now also very possibly not a top 10 summer movie. So yeah, I think not including If was a big mistake. We'll see where The Fall Guy lands, and we'll see how the rest of the summer develops. All right, let's look at the per theater averages for this past weekend, June 14th through the 16th. Inside Out 2 had the highest per theater average of any movie around the country, $34,909 per theater in 4,440 theaters. So a huge turnout, which you can see in a different way by looking at that number. In second place was Ghostlight, which played in just 3 theaters and brought in $12,667 per theater. Ghostlight came out of Sundance with a lot of hype. And fun fact, Kelly O'Sullivan, who co-directed and wrote this film, was my prom date. That's not a joke. I was a senior, she was a junior. I took her to my prom. She probably had a lot more fun at her own prom. But that is the least notable thing about her life and her career right now. Much more important that this movie, I hear, is fantastic, and I can't wait to see it. And I'm very happy to see that she has that success. In third place is Bad Boys Ride or Die with $8,494 per theater in 3,885 theaters. In fourth place is a film called Summer Solstice about a young trans man who reconnects with his childhood friend as they recontextualize their friendship since his transition. And in fifth place is Robot Dreams, which brings in $2,130 per theater in 39 theaters. Looking at the 2024 top per theater averages, Inside Out 2 comes in second place behind just The Taste of Things, which opened to $43,350 per theater in 3 theaters back in February. And you can see the other movies on this list. Love Lies Bleeding in 5 theaters, Stress Positions in 1 theater. I Saw the TV Glow in 4 theaters. They were all very limited release films, 5 theaters or less, which means that Inside Out 2 was basically as in demand as one of these big buzzy indie movies that only plays in a handful of theaters around the country. You don't see a whole lot of movies that are able to drive that kind of turnout. When we look at the top limited release films from this past weekend, and this would be 1,000 theaters or fewer, at number 1 is a film from India. It's a Hindi language film called Chandu Champion. It's a movie about India's first Paralympics gold medalist. In second place is Tuesday from A24, which expanded its reach to 654 theaters and brought in $292,000 total. I actually was able to see this in my local market. I quite liked it. If you can get over the concept in the movie, which you just have to buy into, I thought that it was really, really strong. One of the better movies I've seen this year. In third place was Treasure, which brought in $243,000 in 650 theaters. Treasure stars Lena Dunham and Stephen Fry as a father-daughter duo traveling together in Poland. In fourth place was Firebrand, which played in 442 theaters and brought in $220,000. Firebrand stars Jude Law as Henry VIII and Alicia Vikander as Catherine Parr, the last of his wives and the only one who survived. And in fifth place was I Saw the TV Glow. It brings in another $164,000. All right, let's look at the annual box office charts for 2024. Dune Part 2 remains the top grossing film domestically at $282.1 million. Godzilla Kong the New Empire is at second place at $196.3 million. And Kung Fu Panda 4 is in third place at $193.5 million. All of those films have now ended their domestic runs. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, as of right now, is at $157.8 million at number 4. But Inside Out 2 will soon bypass it because it's at $155 million estimated after its opening weekend, and it will be making its way to that number 1 spot. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire falls 1 spot to number 6. Bad Boys Ride or Die enters the chart. It's now the 7th highest domestic grossing film of the year. If drops down 1 spot to number 8. Bob Marley One Love takes a big tumble down 3 spots to number 9. And The Fall Guy drops 2 spots to number 2. Both the Garfield movie and Mean Girls are now dropped off of the highest grossing domestic films of the year. Looking at the 2024 worldwide box office, Dune Part 2 is at number 1 at $711.8 million, followed by Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, Kung Fu Panda 4, then YOLO and Pegasus 2 from China. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is in 6th place. Article 20 from China is in 7th place. But entering the chart after 1 weekend in 8th place is Inside Out 2. And again, it will start moving up this chart in the weeks to come. Boonie Bear's Time Twist moves down 1 spot to number 9. And the Garfield movie stays at number 10 by virtue of jumping over Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which drops out of the 2024 worldwide box office top 10. And looking at our box office 365-day chart, Elemental expired, and I'm not going to say it rotated out because it wasn't on this chart for 365 days, but its 1-year clock ran out, so it is now gone. YOLO from China is now at number 10, and the next movie to expire is Lost in the Stars from China, which opened last June 22nd. Inside Out 2 will also be making this chart soon, and I think another movie or two from this summer will be on here in the weeks to come. All right, before we wrap up, as we always do, I'm going to take a look at a weekend in box office history, and we're going to go back to June 12th through the 14th, 1987, which has a couple of ties to this summer. At number 1 was the opening of Predator, one of my favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger films, definitely top 5, I think top 3. It opened to $12 million and eventually made $59.7 million. In second place was The Witches of Eastwick, which opened to $9.4 million, actually ended up outgrossing Predator. It made $63.7 million. The movie's based on John Updike's novel. It stars Jack Nicholson, Cher, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Susan Sarandon, and was directed by George Miller, who has a summer movie again this year, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. In third place was Beverly Hills Cop 2, which dropped 30.8% in its 4th weekend. Of course, we get a 4th Beverly Hills Cop movie this summer, although it will not be hitting theaters. It made $8.5 million for a running total of $97.7 million. Its final domestic total was just over $150 million. In 4th place in its 2nd weekend was The Untouchables, which dropped 30% and brought in $7 million for a running total of $25.2 million and a very respectable final gross of $76.2 million. Although I think when people talk about the best movies of the 80s, even though The Untouchables was an Oscar-winning film and people do like it, I still think it's underrated. I love this movie. I've watched it so many times. I'd sit down and watch it again right now. And then opening in 5th place was a new movie called The Believers, which made $4.3 million and ended with a final total of $18.7 million. The Believers stars Martin Sheen as a father protecting his son from a murderous satanic cult. But as we almost always do, let's not leave those numbers where they are. Let's see what they look like in today's dollars by adjusting them for inflation. And when we do, we see that Predator opened to an adjusted total of $33.2 million and a final domestic gross of $165.1 million. The Witches of Eastwick opened to an adjusted total of $26.1 million and a final domestic of $176.2 million. Beverly Hills Cop 2 brought in an adjusted total of $23.7 million in week 4 and a final domestic total of $424.8 million. People loved Eddie Murphy in the 80s. I mean, a lot of people love him now too, but they really loved him in the 80s. The Untouchables brought in an adjusted total of $19.3 million for a final of $210.8 million, and then The Believers brought in just over $12 million. Its final domestic total adjusted for inflation was around $51.8 million. And that wraps us up for this week on Charts with Dan. Coming up this weekend, you've got a few options, though none are going to hit as big as Inside Out 2. First of all, this is kind of neat. On Thursday, the director's cut of Midsommar will be in IMAX. A24 has been releasing a lot of its films in the IMAX format, but it is on Thursday, which is June 20th, which is the actual summer solstice. So you can go see Midsommar on the actual day on which it's set. Then coming up next weekend, The Bike Riders will finally be hitting theaters. It's been a long delayed film. It's also directed by Jeff Nichols, who's from Arkansas. There are Arkansas ties all over this episode. Also hitting theaters this weekend is The Exorcism. I guess Russell Crowe's just going to do all Exorcist movies from now on. And also coming up this weekend is Ghost, Right Here, Right Now, which is a combination concert kind of performance art film from a popular band that I'd never heard of, but I actually watched the trailer and it looks pretty cool. So those are your options coming up this weekend. Of course, I'll be tracking it all right here on the show, and I'll be back next Monday to track the second weekend of Inside Out 2, as well as the continuing adventures of the summer box office. And stay tuned right here on the channel for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Check out the description below for more info about our great sponsors and also about those tickets to that live event in New York City that I'm doing with Christian Harloff on Friday night. And as always, thanks for spending part of your day here with me. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.